I'm Bridget Pettit and I'm a Kaizen specialist at SASH. This SASH Plus Bite-sized presentation is about promoting innovation. Why is this important? Kaizen is about continuous improvement, finding new ways to do new things, however big or small. These slides are going to go through what we mean by creativity and innovation and how they can be applied in healthcare and examples of how they're being used in SASH, and demonstrate some practical exercises and techniques you can use, work on your own or with your own teams to promote innovation. All you'll need if you want to participate in the exercise is a blank piece of paper and a pen. So what do we mean by creativity? Creativity is a connecting and rearranging knowledge in the minds of people who will allow themselves to think flexibly to generate new and often surprising ideas that others judge to be useful. When we're talking about creativity here, we use the concept of directed creativity, where we are channeling that creativity to then become something that we can go on to use. Creativity is bringing together two previously unrelated planes of thought. So, for example, you've got mobile phones, smartphones that started off being just a way of talking to each other, and now they involve video, emails, a camera, so much more than just a telephone. The other example here is the Razzle Dazzle ship. This is the Razzle Dazzle camouflage. It was used from World War I onwards, and using the techniques of artists that are drawing on camouflage, zebra camouflage, means it's really hard to focus a shot against the ship. So what is innovation? Innovation is directed creativity implemented. This involves the purposeful production of creative ideas in a given topic area, followed up by deliberate efforts to implement some of those ideas. If you look at this kind of funnel for innovation, you see that you'll have a huge number of ideas generated, and then there's a kind of funnel process of the ideas, some proportion of those being harvested, another smaller proportion being developed, some tested, and then you come out with quite a small number that are actually used. So it's really important to generate lots of ideas at the beginning, and it doesn't matter that they're not all implemented. It's a kind of process to get through to implementing these ideas. So when do we need creativity, creative thinking? It's when you've got, it's important to think creatively and differently all the time, but it's particularly important when you've got defects or long lead times, which continue to be a problem every day. Or when people say we need more staff or more clinic rooms, things like that, it's often important to think of a creative alternative, creative way of using things. Or when people say, we've just always done it this way. These are times when it's really useful to think creative. There are three principles behind creativity: attention, escape, and movement. Paying attention is really focusing in and observing, pausing and noticing about the issue that you're looking at. The way we do this, particularly with using our SASH Plus methodology, is to observe any process from the perspective of the patient. Really just sitting and observing, watching what's going on, standing back and pausing, rather than assuming that it's going in a certain way. If you want to learn more about how we do that, there are the other bite-sized methods here, or our courses. So you need to pay attention to the actual process or the issue in hand. What are the usual ways of thinking about this situation? What are the usual problem-solving approaches that you would use? And how are they working for you? And it's about pausing and notice the experience from elsewhere that might help. And then escape. This is a real focus of what we do in this session. It's looking at how can you escape and think differently. What might people do in other industries or settings do? How would somebody from a different age or background think about this? What have circumstances forced us to really think differently? And we've had a lot of experience of that recently with the COVID-19 experience of really making us change the way we do things. And then movement. Move in your mind to new ideas and new possibilities. It's about making those new connections that you hadn't made before. To think in directions away from your usual thinking without premature judgment. Quite often what stifles new ideas is people worrying about the judgment before they even come out of their mouths. So it's about having ideas without judging them before they're looked at properly and tested. The concept of mental valleys is very interesting here. It comes from the thinking of Edward de Bono's understanding of language development in the mind. It likens the random rainfall across the land, which is channeled into river valleys, to how ideas and thinking are channeled in our minds. Valleys are useful for channeling and understanding ideas, but part of thinking differently is to challenge some of these mental valleys. So you could see how the thinking around mobile phones has been seen in this way. The initial development will be incremental changes within the valley, so maybe changing from doing dialing to having push buttons, but then a completely different stream of value of ideas, such as email, music, and the camera, has been linked across to bring those into the telephone. Part of thinking differently and being creative is looking at ways we can escape those mental valleys. This requires creative thinking requires connecting and rearranging information in our mental valleys, recognizing the valleys that we're in and actively escaping them. Only after escaping the mental valleys and challenging those assumptions can we then explore other possibilities. So some examples of escaping mental valleys. I gave you the example of the telephone, but you can see ones in healthcare, for example, drive-through clinics. You've got a jump from a healthcare industry from the fast food industry. You could also say that using these SASH Plus methodologies, we are drawing on Toyota car production systems to apply them to healthcare. So that's a leap from one mental valley to another. A recent innovation we've been working on in SASH was the decontamination of the PF23 hoods using ultraviolet light. These hoods were used by people who can't be fit tested on masks, but need to go into COVID areas. It was important for us to get them decontaminated thoroughly using ultraviolet light, which the machines have mostly been used for decontaminating rooms and not doing these hoods. We needed to try and make sure that the hoods managed to access all aspects of all areas of the hood, which you can imagine is quite difficult because they are sort of helmet shaped. So we tried all sorts of different approaches to look at ways of doing this. We put them in cages, we suspended them from broom handles in the cages. We tried and thought of lots of different approaches, and the one that we ended up settling for was the hoods suspended on S-hooks on chains from the motors that you use that rotate disco lights, disco balls. But the hoods needed to be angled in a particular way, so we suspended 1 kilo bags of rice initially to tilt the hood in a particular way. There's a huge team of us working on this, from infection control, the estates, the electricians, nurses, the Kaizen team, all contributing different ideas to think of a new way of effectively making this work. So I'm going to go on now to run through some techniques that you can use to escape those mental valleys and to channel some of those ideas into innovations. So the ones we're going to look at here is wordplay, be someone else, 7 ways. And then we're going to go through parallel thinking, which is a useful way of assessing those ideas and getting a team together to think in a useful way to how to harvest and work through those ideas together. So wordplay, this is really thinking about using words and associations in the brain to challenge and explore the idea, particularly that you're trying to change. You might want to pick out jargons or specialist words used in your issue, um, and really analyse them. Pretend that you don't know what those words mean, and ask for plain English and synonyms for the words, and then use those new words to stimulate brainstorming and then looking for commonalities. And it's really about trying to think differently. So we might use a particular jargon or particular term that means different things to different people, and it's just exploring those ideas. Or you can use completely different words, to draw on words from nature or other areas of work, just to try and get a team thinking differently, thinking a little bit more creatively, rather than staying within those mental valleys and having one idea about how to change something. Another aspect of escape, which we mentioned earlier, is be someone else. Look at the issue from the point of view of somebody who might think differently. Examples are: how would an airplane deal with this? How would a restaurant or a teacher or a young person look at this issue? And we've got a really great example using the Kaizen event in pharmacy stores of be somebody else. There was a problem of returned items built in the trust building up in pharmacy stores. Different categories of items were returning: patients' own medicines that needed to be disposed of directly, but also things that we had issued from the stores that had been unused and returned, and these could go back onto the shelves and go around again. There were other things coming back, such as TTOs. So this was building up into a big mountain of things just waiting to be dealt with. And they used, in the Kaizen event, they used this idea of a recycling centre. How does a recycling centre deal with the things and sort it out? And after they'd worked through the pile, they came up with this, as you can see in the picture, a recycling station. Another example of how we used this was in a RPIW, where we were looking at patient information in the eye clinic, and to stop making sure that we didn't just focus on the information that we have on leaflets that we hand out, the written information. We thought differently, and the team worked through how would the V&A or a big successful museum provide information to people, or how would travel agents give information out to prospective customers. And this brainstorming and being someone else came up with the idea of a virtual tour of the clinic, familiarising people with the process that you go through, which can be quite complex, and the different equipment that people might be faced in the clinic, rather than just focusing on rewriting the information that we have in written form. 7 Ways is a very useful tool for generating lots of different ideas in a team. It's when you want to develop lots of ideas very rapidly, when you want to push people out of mental valleys and past the usual ideas, the usual solutions. You're focusing on a particular idea, a particular element of improvement work. And it's very useful in a team where you might have some individuals who don't feel empowered to speak up about their ideas in a group. And it can work you can just do it as an individual, you can do it on your own, or you can work as in a small group. It's really useful if you're focusing on a particular knotty problem that you want to look at. So with this one, I'm going to do a works example going through how to encourage greater uptake of flu vaccines within SASH staff. How can we encourage this? And what we're doing is we want to get 7 different ideas on this. So if you see in the picture, we've just folded up a piece of paper, A4 paper, into 8 and written the initial question up in the top left-hand corner. And then each person individually, quietly themselves, quietly brainstorms 7 answers to the problem in the other sections on the paper. And often it's really good to use draw on the creative side of your brain, so making pictures. So you need to do this really quickly. The time pressure helps because that makes you think really differently. And you should just not think about practicalities at this stage. Think of any ideas as bizarre as possible, if you want to, just to see if you can get some exciting new ideas. If you're going to participate in this, just pause the video here, create this paper yourself, and then brainstorm seven ideas on that, really pushing to get your seventh idea, however bizarre it might, however eccentric it might seem. But just so pause the video here for about 3 minutes, but for no longer, and try the exercise yourself. So this is the worked example. We've got 6 sections of ideas here. You can see on the left-hand side, we've got a group of them, or some of them have been illustrated. And on the right side, you can see some of these ideas. Having a drive-through clinic is there, having vouchers and incentives to do it. We've got some making it mandatory, lots of different ideas there. So but the next stage is to split those ideas up, in each of them onto a different sheet, separate them out, and as a group, put them together into themes on an infinity diagram, what we call an infinity diagram. So here we've captured them together. The top left-hand side of you can see that's which is the biggest collection, shows some form of incentive like vouchers, particularly free parking, gifts, prize draws. To the right, we've got ways of making the vaccines more accessible. So things like the drive-through clinic, or having somebody in every team that can do the vaccine. And then we've got down on the left, we've got information, giving more information and education about the efficacy of the vaccine, and myth-busting issues, giving examples from patients who've had flu very seriously and why it's important to protect those people. And then down at the bottom right, we've got some ideas around how to celebrate the success within SASH, different teams, the team that has the most being celebrated and rewarded, making it very transparent of which teams have and haven't had the flu vaccine. And then you've got some other ideas that are slightly more unusual. So sort of a 2-for-1, you get a different vaccine at the same time. Offering it to the families as well as the individual, and having, say, for example, the drive-through clinics. So if you've done this yourself, you might want to just think, where do your ideas fit into this? And are there any, do they come into those categories? This can really help to show, if you've got a team, you can see which ideas are the most popular. So you can see those ones very quickly, what people are thinking, but also you can explore the more unusual, ways of thinking. So once you've got a range of different ideas, some will seem really promising and it's worth trying to develop them further. A technique so you want to harvest these ideas, enhance the ideas to make them stronger, and pay attention to the detail and document them onto paper. Often with developing ideas, our minds become a bit of a jumble as we try to think alone or in a group, and this can impede good thinking. And it's quite useful to have an organised way to think through all the angles of an idea of a situation. And this is where our concept of parallel thinking and 6 hats, and this is an exercise that you can do to help pull those ideas together. So if you want to take one of those ideas that you'd like to work through and develop, it might be from the example we had earlier of the drive-through clinics, or inviting friends, family to have the flu jab, or giving out vouchers, free parking. You might want to take one of those ideas and think it through and develop it and see how it might work. Parallel thinking. Thinking in a group is better when everybody's thinking together in parallel rather than in cross purposes. Thinking in parallel helps the creative process, and it can speed up decision makings, improves the assessment quality, and gives all styles of thinkers a voice. and it enables you to adequately evaluate a creative idea for its potential. So we call it the 6 hats. So one person acts as facilitator, and then you go through in a very with your team or yourself on your own the different aspects, the different hats. So you'd all think for about a minute on which on the yellow hat, which is what do you like about this particular thing. So what do you like about the idea of a drive-through flu clinic? And then when you've all talked about that, you go on to talking about what are your concerns about it, what are the issues, and then you can go on to what further information do you need. You know, how would you do it, the practicalities of it, how popular would it be, that kind of thing. And then you go into how do you feel about it, because quite often some of our concerns might actually come from how we're feeling about it, and often we don't explore how we feel about things. And then that discussion led on to any new ideas, any development of the idea from that perspective. And thinking in that way can really help in a team where you might have people who like to just jump with an idea and rush off with it and not think about the other details of it, or you might have somebody who tends to think about things from a very concerned perspective. And if you all this approach forces everybody to think engages everybody in thinking from a different perspective, a different way together. And then once you've got your idea and you've evaluated it and you've started to develop it, the next stage is action. This is your movement stage, and it's about testing those ideas and see how they work and evaluating them and trying them out, trying to decide whether to implement it. And it's really important to stay focused on learning, going through and testing them out so that you don't end up just with the usual solution in the end. And that brings us on to an approach we use for testing ideas, which is called Plan, Do, Study, Act, PDSA. And there is a bite-sized session on that, which I would recommend you follow up. This bite-sized presentation describes the concept of creativity and innovation and shows how they can be used in healthcare. When creativity, the connecting and rearranging of knowledge to generate new ideas, is directed on a focused topic, innovation is the implementation of these creative ideas. Creativity and innovation is appropriate in any setting, but particularly when we have defects or long lead times. We explore the ideas of mental values which can get in the way of creative thinking, and the principles of creativity: attention, escape, and movement. Some practical approaches to promoting that escape side of the creative thinking in a team included 7 ways, be someone else, and thinking differently and parallel thinking to develop those ideas were explored in the activity 6 hats. The movement side of creativity can be explored used in the PDSA cycle, which is the Plan, Do, Study, Act. And I recommend that you look at the bite-sized section we've got here on SeshNet on PDSA.